Welcome to The More Perfect Union, the podcast that offers real debate without the hate. I'm Rebecca Kushmiter here in Kensington, Maryland, and I am pleased to once again share the mic with DJ McGuire.
Yes, and I must say, last week's convention was one of the best I've seen from the Republicans in a long time. Wait, I'm getting no information. Go to somebody else, Rebecca. Hang on.
And Kevin Kelton.
I will say that last week's convention was one of the best, if not the best I've ever seen. Of course, it's hard to compare them since each one you think at that time is a great one. But I think the Democrats achieved what they wanted to achieve, and we'll talk more about that.
Yeah, we've been off for a couple of weeks, and we figured we'd wait until after the convention to regroup and discuss it. And did they really did deliver. We all knew it was going to be a bit of a heavy lift. It's a hard pivot to change from one candidate to another. There were definitely some people on the speakers list who you could tell were there to shore up the case for Joe Biden, Leon Panetta. And
I didn't think of that, but you're right.
But overall, I really think it sent the right message. It brought the right energy, and it was really, and they made the roll call entertaining. I didn't think that was even possible. But let's talk about what our top hits were. Let's each name our top 3 moments from the convention. DJ, I'm going to start with you, just because I like putting you on the spot.
For me, number 3 was Adam Kinzinger's speech. It was nice to see someone who was part of my little niche of the political spectrum getting some prime time and talking about what has happened to the Republican Party, what a mess it is, and why the Democratic Party really is the only alternative left. My top 2 came from Kamala Harris's acceptance speech. First, Donald Trump is an unserious man, but there are serious consequences. I think that perfectly sets
that
up.
Was a very good line.
It's basically a much more sophisticated version of Charlie Sykes' statement, a clown with a flamethrower still has a flamethrower. But for me, the top moment, frankly, was when she got into foreign policy and when she got into democracies versus tyrants. I mean, yes, she could have just ticked the box with Ukraine and NATO, which she did. And I would have been happy with that and said, okay, that's it, we're good. But she went further into it. And the phrase, it is still something that rattles around in my brain and will, because I enjoy it so much. In the eternal struggle between democracy and tyranny, I know where I stand and I know where the United States belongs. That is not the kind of thing I have heard out of any convention in maybe 20 years. I loved hearing it. I think most of the country loved hearing it. Donald Trump made the Democrats the party of national security by accident. They didn't necessarily want to be. It's not what they wanted to focus on, but they kind of had to. What Kamala Harris is saying in 2024 is, I got this. This is part of what we're doing, and we're going to do it well. They owned the national security issue, which they have not done in a long time. They haven't tried it in a long time. They tried, and they succeeded.
Kevin, what were your top 3 moments?
Well, I'm going to start with the one thing about the convention that I didn't like as much. So I'm going to start with Kevin's negativity. Wasn't crazy about the DJ. I felt that was a little pandering to the youth vote. But you know what? They pulled it off. People seem to like it. I'm an old guy. I probably wouldn't have liked him if he was just in a club doing DJ work. So I'll give them a pass at that. In terms of top 3 moments, there were so many wonderful moments. And of course, it's tempting to go with the ones that everybody talked about, like Michelle's speech, Obama's speech, obviously. I really enjoyed Bill Clinton's speech, even though it went on too long. I always love hearing him talk. But for me, there were 2 distinct moments. Well, I'll add a third. The lieutenant governor of Georgia, whose name escapes me, who's a Republican, who's
Jeff Duncan.
Thank you, Jeff Duncan. I really thought that was a highlight. I'm going to go 3, 2, 1. My second highlight was Kamala's first speech on the first night of the convention, which wasn't expected. Very rare from a nominee. And I thought it was pitch perfect in terms of showing that she was there, saying hello, introducing herself, not going on too long, and just the spirit of it set the tone for, I think, the next 4 days. So I thought that was great. Of course, I really enjoyed her acceptance speech, as I did Tim Walz's. But to me, the best speech for me, the most moving speech of the convention was Doug Emhoff. I thought he nailed it. Not just in introducing his wife, his spouse, to the country, but introducing himself. And I came away from that speech saying, I would like spending time with Doug Emhoff. They talk about Tim Walz being a regular guy. Doug seems like the kind of guy that I could be very comfortable with.
Yeah. And when his daughter spoke, I noticed there was a point where Kamala's niece and nephew came out to speak, and I drew a contrast on Twitter saying, Kamala Harris's niece and nephew were on stage telling people why they should support her. Donald Trump's niece and nephew wrote tell-all books warning people about him. We are not the same. My top three, every moment of the Walz family was a highlight. The first night, Gwen and Tim were in tears the whole time. You'd see them choking up at every moment. Like I loved when Hope and Gus were giving Tim bunny ears during, when someone stuck a microphone in his face, and then later he tweeted, "Yeah, my kids keep me humble." I loved Gus cheering. And, I know there was so much discussion about what to say and what not to say about Gus. Okay, clearly family of criers. So yeah, he's going to cry when he's emotional. But it reminded me so much of being at a JV lacrosse game. And when one of my son's teammates scored, there were like 9 people in the audience. His adult sister was there watching. She's a cop. She had the afternoon off, so she was there watching. Her brother scores. She's on her feet screaming, "That's my brother!" and cheering like they'd won a national championship. So I'm like, yeah, they're a sports family who cries. Gus's reactions made perfect sense to me. So I loved seeing them. I loved the energy they brought to the party, really, and to the convention. Probably my number 2 was a moment, the one that sticks with me, was when Raphael Warnock said, "I need my neighbor's child to be okay so my child can be okay," and started naming spots around the world where he needs those children to be okay because they are our neighbors, and that is how all of our children are okay. And that, to me, was probably the strongest foreign policy statement of the convention, because it just reminds you that America is part of a global community and everyone in the global community matters. And then I'm going to say my top speech of the whole convention, stipulating that Kamala's speech was extraordinary and actually probably on another level, Michelle Obama.
And she also, she's taken the role of being a first lady to a level no one's ever taken it before. Well, maybe Eleanor Roosevelt, but short of her, I don't think anyone else has ever been as much their own person as she has been. Okay.
So moving along into more serious topics, we covered a lot of ground at the convention. Reproductive justice was very much spotlighted, foreign policy, a lot of good talk about domestic issues like access to healthcare, drug pricing, and housing costs. What do you guys think is not being discussed? What issues do we need to maybe get back to the surface of this conversation? Kevin, I know you have thoughts on this.
I do. So immigration has been brought up ever since Donald Trump came down that escalator in 2015. And of course, it's a big campaign issue on his side this year. I would like to see the Democrats somehow address his immigration policies with a lot more detail and make it clear to the country what it means to try to gather up and send out 3 to 5 to 10 million or more people. I don't think that people really understand what that means. It means you can't do it with just ICE. You have to use law enforcement, and ultimately you have to use the military, whether it's the National Guard, whether it's the Army. So that means that Americans would be seeing, if Donald Trump were elected and attempted this deportation plan of his, this mass deportation plan, which I believe he is dead set on trying, It means you will have trucks of armed military troops on the streets of every American city looking for these people. You will be living in a city with armed military police going up and down the streets looking for immigrants. It's the only way to do this. You will also be seeing, think of it. If you're going to gather several thousand people a day and you have to ship them from wherever they are to wherever you're going to house them until you can deport them, how are you going to do that? It's not going to be in buses because there's not enough of them and they're not big enough. It's going to be on trains. So you're going to see the same images that we saw in Schindler's List and every other Nazi movie, which is these others, these third world people, in this case, Latinos, being marched into train stations and ushered onto trains at gunpoint. Do Americans want that? And the third issue, there's so many things about this that I think people need to be aware of, is if you're going to round up, again, we're talking about thousands and thousands of people a day to reach the goals that Donald Trump wants to reach. There's going to be mistakes, because how are you going to do that? You're going to send these troops, whether it's ICE, whether it's police, whether it's military troops, you're going to be sending them into large companies, manufacturing companies, factories, into schools, and they're going to be rounding up people and looking for documentation. And what if you belong in this country, but you look like one of these people? And by the way, there will be profiling, and you don't have the right paperwork. They're not going to be that picky about who they put on the buses and the trains. And a lot of people will be rounded up accidentally. And that means you're going to have the children of immigrants leaving for school in the morning, being dropped off at school by their moms and dads, getting out of school, and their moms and dads aren't there anymore. And there's no word of what happened to them. And they'll be waiting a day, they'll be waiting 2 days, they'll call their aunt, their uncle, if they're still around, and they're never coming back, and they won't know what happened to them. The whole process, even if you believe that immigration is the scourge that so many people believe it is, I know I'm going on a rant here, I'll wrap up. Even if it's a major issue for you, this prescription, this cure is worse than the problem. And I think if Latino voters in Arizona and Nevada and Georgia, if there's enough there, and I think minority voters in Michigan, when you explain to them what Donald Trump's plan means, the nuts and bolts of what we're looking at, I think that his support in those communities will melt like the Wicked Witch of the West.
You brought up raids on manufacturing facilities or business facilities, and I think that is something that we have not adequately thought through. If you have an ICE raid on a meat processing plant, on a farm with workers out in the fields, and they arrest 10%, 20%, 50% of the workforce of that facility, that's going to dramatically affect how that business operates, definitely in the short term, possibly in the longer term. It's going to quell hiring because they're not going to want to be subject to raids. And
it's going to raise prices, so it's inflationary.
Yeah. Because what they're talking, they're not talking about stopping immigration. They're talking about punishing immigrants, which is a different thing. You seal the borders and stop letting people in. Okay, fine. But the people who are here,
let's not turn this into Nazi Germany in 1939.
Yeah.
Please,
and certainly
God, let's not do that in America.
Let's retain due process.
Yes.
Because what they're talking about is A, infeasible, and B, inhumane.
While you were discussing this issue, I already have a picture in mind, which probably neither of you two thought about for various partisan reasons, because it's an older picture. But I remember the first photo of the authorities seizing Elian Gonzalez from his Florida home in April of 2000.
And people were up in arms about that.
People were furious about it. And I say to this day, the seizure of Elian Gonzalez is the actual reason George W. Bush was president of the United States. It flipped Hispanics in Florida, and it flipped the state of Florida. And that picture all by itself is more than enough. I mean, it'll be that picture times 10 million, because this is not something that is going to stop at 3 million. It's not going to stop at 5 million. For Donald Trump, it will be his drug. It will be his cocaine. He will want
it will be his gladiatorial arena. He's going to want to see.
Want the numbers to always want the numbers to rise. So it is never actually going to end.
It'll be his Dow Jones Industrial Average.
Up, something like that. So
that's the worst analogy.
I'm kind of proud.
I mean, like, it's a good analogy, but it's so awful.
Yeah.
But it's in terms of the issue that I would like to talk about more. If we had done this podcast last week, I would have said international trade and Trump's tariff plan. But Kamala Harris is already calling it Donald Trump's $3,900 tax hike, which it is, by the way. Excellent labeling. So that's cool. that is no longer an issue not talked about. The first 3 days the convention really didn't talk about foreign policy. The last one did. So that box is ticked. We're good there. I think the one thing that no one is talking about, that the rest of us sort of kind of look at with concern, or at least I do, is the continually growing federal deficit. We are at a point in the economic cycle where the deficit should be at its minimum, not near or at its maximum and going up. It fell considerably in 2021 after the COVID spending went cycled out. Yes, but it is still north of $1 trillion, north of 4 to 5% of GDP, which is an unsustainable level. And especially now that interest rates have been normalized again, we're talking about payments on the U.S. debt that are now more than the entire Defense Department. We really need to get a grip on all of this stuff. And we have avoided talking about it mainly because Donald Trump was a 4-alarm fire. COVID threw everything out the window. And because we'd had this very long period of very low interest rates. The low interest rate period is done. The pandemic is, well, not over. It has become largely manageable. And hopefully, Donald Trump will be consigned to the ash heap of history in November. But there needs to be some discussion, at least afterwards then. Somebody needs to come to the American people and say, we can't keep doing this anymore. We got to find a way to balance the books. And nobody wants to have that discussion. So it won't be had. But it needs to be at some point.
I agree. One of my big criticisms of my party, the Democratic Party, it's bugged me for decades, that every time they propose a tax, a wealth tax, a 1% on stock trades, whatever they propose, they never say we're going to use it to pay down the debt. They always want to put it towards a new program. Stop doing that. If you're going to propose these things, especially in an election year, say we're going to use this to pay down the debt. Rebecca, what is your issue?
The cost of college and access to college. We've talked a lot about relieving student debt for people who are paying off money they borrowed 10, 15, 20 years ago, and how to provide them relief. But the cost of college for new students is extraordinary. And I think we have reached a point where there needs to be some examination, and I would like to actually see a task force out of the Department of Education to do this, some examination of what is causing the cost of college. What are you paying for? What is the university using that money to do? Is it delivering the core mission of educating students? Which is not to say that colleges aren't educating students. I'm just saying there's a lot else going on those campuses, and maybe there's been some mission drift, and costs could be contained if that were to be curtailed a little bit. Not by fiat, but by pointing out to institutions, listen, maybe you need to get back to basics a little bit. And in addition to the cost of college being so high, the criteria for entry into college has gotten really quite bizarre. You start getting these weighted grade point averages where a kid has a 4.7 GPA and they've started a nonprofit and they, went to the Amazon and planted an entirely new rainforest the summer between their sophomore and junior year. who can compete against that? What is the purpose of college if you are coming in that complete a person already? Do you even need an undergraduate degree? Maybe dial that back a little bit too, and make it more about academic performance and less about everything else in your life, because it is kind of a referendum on who students are as a person when they're applying. And that's unlike any other major nation in the world in terms of their admissions policies. And we need to rethink it, because we've gotten a little extra. And maybe we don't need to be.
I kind of wonder, why is that issue so top of the mind for Rebecca?
I don't know.
Could it be that her oldest child began his senior year of high school today?
Junior year, actually, but
junior year. I'm
junior
sorry.
year. No, it's but let me tell you, the SAT review books are getting delivered as we speak, and we're starting to make lists of campuses to go see. My kid is a good student. He's a good student. If he were applying to college in 1990 when I was, he would have gotten his pick.
The little bit that I know about him from what you've told us, I think he's going to do pretty good getting college.
Yeah, I think he's going to be. I think he's the best. Like, yeah. But they don't let moms write an essay about their kids. It's really crazy. I've got a friend in admissions. I should talk to her about adding that to applications. Like, where's the mom testimonial section?
And so following up on Kevin's point, unless you had something else to say, Rebecca.
No, I've got lots else to say, but I'll let you have a turn.
Okay. Only one Democratic president in my lifetime, and I think he's the only one in Kevin's lifetime too, has specifically proposed a tax increase for the purpose of reducing the deficit or the debt. That was Bill Clinton in 1993. He remains one of only two Democrats since World War II to get reelected, and the only Democrat since World War II to get reelected with more votes for reelection than he got for his first election. That should tell something to our current political leadership that, yes, if come from the right perspective, deficit reduction can be a winning issue. You just have to be sincere about it. You have to be consistent about it, which was George Bush the Elder's problem over taxes. And you have to push it through, which Bill Clinton did, and it did succeed.
Back to our current campaign, we are in a battle between Kamala Harris and the mainstream media, who wants more access to Kamala Harris. And apparently there are a lot of people saying she needs to do a sit-down interview or give a press conference. Agree, disagree? DJ, I'll let you go first.
I would disagree in the short term and agree in the medium term. Probably a good idea to have, at least by October, some kind of I would say 60 minutes deal. I think that would be of greater value than a press conference. Press conferences are not what they used to be. It's just various reporters shouting something that is interesting to them. And maybe if you can hear them, they might be interesting. But politicians don't give answers at press conferences anymore. They give little sound bites. It's almost as bad as debates. We'll get to it in a minute. But, a sit-down interview with 60 Minutes or something is a chance for Ms. Harris to expound on what she would do, what she thinks, where she and President Biden go in the same direction, where they might go in different directions, just how much of a debilitation a Donald Trump's second term would be, and those kinds of things. I think that would be better for her, and I think it would be better for us as voters than a press conference with a bunch of reporters looking to figure out what their next headline is, and a politician who will be immediately on the defensive wondering, how can I make sure that there's nothing that my opponents can get to me in 30-second bits, and how something that I think that can help my campaign in 30-second bits. I don't think that's as important as, say, a sit-down interview.
Kevin, what do you think?
I think this is one of the most overblown issues in a presidential campaign I've ever heard. It's just silliness. And the only reason it is an issue is because the Republicans are desperate to find issues that they can hold against the Democratic ticket. And they've created this out of whole cloth. And I have to say that the media has helped them by adding to the drumbeat of when is she going to do a press conference? When is she going to do an interview? She's going to do it. She's going to do it. When they started asking this, Joe Biden had just stepped aside and kind of anointed her as his heir apparent. Like 2 or 3 weeks earlier, she was preparing, she was doing campaign events. She was creating an entire campaign, including hiring staff. And she was preparing for the DNC. She didn't get around to it yet, but she's going to do it. And she's not going to fall apart. People seem to think, oh, she's afraid to speak to the press. Are you crazy? The woman is fine talking. She had one inopportune moment in an interview with Lester Holt where he asked her about going to the southern border. And she said, no, I've never been to the southern border. I've also never been to Europe, which, by the way, I don't think was that bad an idea to say, but they blew that into, oh, what a dumb thing to say. I don't know why. By the way,
I think it was within the first 6 months of the administration. She hasn't been to the southern border or Europe in that 6-month period. Like, right. But it was all, it could still happen. It was like, yeah, I haven't been there yet.
And you don't have to go to the southern border to discuss the immigration problem. 99% of the people in this country have never been to the southern border, and yet they have a lot of opinions about how to fix immigration. By the way, I looked it up today, and if my research is correct, Ronald Reagan never went to the southern border. So anyways, I think it's overblown. She's going to do it. By the way, DJ, I was trying to think of who the right organization, the right interviewer was for her to do her first sit down. I think you're right. 60 Minutes is the perfect place because they will not ask gotcha questions and it will have the level of gravitas that you want, but yet it will be more than just policy questions. She's going to do fine. And then they'll make some other ridiculous issue out of whole cloth.
See, I was thinking it should be Katie Couric. One question. What do you read? That's it.
I like it.
Don't make it harder than it has to be. And we're coming up on a debate, and I think this is actually probably something she's trying to put off until after the debate because, staggering your primetime appearances makes a lot of sense if you're trying to stay in the conversation. You want to ride the different news cycles. But today, Trump was whining, is that the right word? Haranguing about the upcoming September 10th debate, commenting that he doesn't like the rules that they're proposing for this now. And then there was a statement out of the Harris campaign saying, we want there to be live mics through the entire debate. His staff wants the mute button because apparently they don't think he can behave himself for 90 minutes. DJ and I believe that there will not be a debate. Kevin, would you like to debate us on the debate?
I'm not going to debate you. I believe there will be a debate on September 10th, or if not that date, there will be a debate in September. And I'm just surprised that you guys actually believe there isn't going to be a debate. But of course, I could be wrong. Time will tell.
He's got Tulsi Gabbard helping him with debate prep.
I actually think that's a good choice. I heard some moderators today making fun of it. I think she's as good a choice as anyone.
Tulsi may be a complete whack job as a politician, but she's not a bad debater. Yeah. So, and in terms of skill sets, okay.
You think Donald Trump is going to take advice from a woman?
I think Donald Trump will take advice from the men in the room who agree with the woman.
Maybe.
Yes, right.
And I think Tulsi can, I think Gabbard can convince probably a number of them. Again, I did this with the first debate with Joe Biden. Clearly, Donald Trump was much more confident about facing off with Joe Biden, and we can all understand why. But I still don't think, I'm not going to believe there is a debate until Donald Trump actually begins talking in that studio on September 10th, because there is, even now, debates don't help him. Debates have never helped him.
In fact, and he has a lot more to lose in this particular debate than Kamala Harris does.
First of all, I think that the reason that there's going to be a debate is not because Donald Trump I think Donald Trump does need it. He needs it because he needs one more big moment in this campaign to blunt the Harris momentum and to hopefully create a moment that they can say, oh, look, she made a big error. She's not ready for the presidency. But I just want to address this hot mic question for a second. A lot of people today think that the reason that the issue came up is that Trump is getting cold feet over having a hot mic because his people don't believe that he can contain himself on a hot mic. I don't think that that's what they're worried about. I think the reason they don't want a hot mic is because they don't want Kamala Harris to be able to interrogate him during his answers. They don't want Kamala Harris to be able to play moderator because she is damn good at that. And I think that's the reason they want the mute button there.
Oh, so they're afraid of the Kamala Harris that interrogated Jeff Sessions, that interrogated Brett Kavanaugh, that prosecuted criminal cases, coming out and asking him follow-up questions.
And an open mic plays to that strength that allows her to do it.
Well, it opens up the opportunity for I'm speaking to happen, which that was the first steamroller to leave tracks on Mike Pence in that campaign. He never did come back from that.
That and the fly, yes.
Yeah, I have a t-shirt that says I'm speaking. But there is still, the congressional map is still very much in question. There are state and local elections happening all over the place. What do you think, DJ? What do you prognosticate when we talk about the House and the Senate? Any optimism?
Yes, actually. I have never thought the Republicans would keep the House after the incredible shit show that was 2023.
You mean ousting speakers and Marjorie Taylor Greene making fun of people's eyelashes
all
and
of that kind of thing, and George
Comer,
Santos,
George Santos,
all that kind of stuff. That's sort of an undercurrent, but especially now with Harris sort of running as the we're not going back to the chaos, we're not going back to the crazy. The House GOP has been all crazy all the time, and I think voters are going to reject that. You have to remember the Republicans got a narrow 9-seat majority, despite winning the popular vote by more than 3 points. They have the reverse problem that Democratic nominees for president do. And that if the popular vote is even, that means Republicans are in a minority in the House. And I don't think the popular vote will be even. I think Democrats will narrowly be ahead of the popular vote, and that will be enough to give them a majority. On the Senate side, I've always assumed that 48 was the Democratic floor. For a while, I thought 48 was also the Democratic ceiling. But both Sherrod Brown and John Tester have been getting fairly decent polling numbers. Brown in particular looks like he will probably hold the seat in Ohio. There are various polls that show Tester behind. There are various polls that show Tester ahead. It's Montana. It will always come down to the wire. It always has.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a pretty good position for Democrats to be in, considering the 2024 map. So if they can come in, obviously if they come in 50-50 with a Harris victory, they can maintain Senate control. But even if they come in at a mere 51-49, that Republican majority in the Senate is not really going to be able to do much. Lisa Murkowski is not going to join in on their culture war nonsense. She's there till 2028.
Lankford actually isn't up for re-election this cycle, so he's potentially an ally on continued common sense immigration reform. That gets us into it's still a Republican majority does slow up and hold up judicial appointments because Mitch McConnell broke that irreparably.
A Republican majority will cause some problems for a Harris administration, no doubt, and certainly when it comes to the judicial branch. I don't see Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski waging the equivalent of a holy war on Kamala Harris's cabinet. I don't think they're going to try. I don't think they would do that. They're going to stop all the cabinet nominations. They may pick off one or two that are weak, because that always, there's always a mistake made. But if Democrats can come in with 49, that'll be a very good position for Kamala Harris as president. And they could, in theory, even give a real, God help us, a Trump second term. If they have a Democratic House majority along with them, they're not going to stop a lot of what Donald Trump has done, but they can slow it down a little. And that could mean something if we're in worst case scenarios, and God knows what else and everything else. It could mean something. But again, no matter what happens, the Democrats are flipping back the House. I've always said that. I still say it. And yeah, I feel much better about the Senate than I did 2 weeks ago.
Kevin, what do you think?
I want to build on what DJ said, as I often try to. You mentioned Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, and they're also a buffer for the Harris administration on abortion rights. Because if there's a 49-51 Republican Senate and the new Senate Majority Leader thinks about changing or doing away with the filibuster, the 60 vote threshold, you add Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins to 49 on the Democratic side, and there's enough votes there to get a House-passed 24-week Roe versus Wade style piece of legislation to President Harris's desk. So they could be, as you said, they could be the Joe Manchins of the next Senate.
Well, let's pivot a little bit to the abortion question. There are actually almost a dozen states with abortion measures on the ballot. In most cases, it's to affirm a right to abortion. Actually, I believe in Nebraska, there's one of each. So voters are going to have to pick whether they want to affirm it or uphold a ban. And do you think this moves the needle on turnout? We're looking at Arizona, Nevada, and Nebraska, among others. You know, a highly motivated pro-choice base in Arizona could be the game that Kamala Harris needs, the Steph Curry three-pointer at the end of the game against France.
It's a one-word answer, yes.
And the evidence for it is in Kansas, which had a referendum in 2022.
Oh, Ohio had one as well.
But in Kansas, the referendum passed, and the Democrats held the governorship and actually I think flipped the congressional seat. Either they flipped it or they held one that they had flipped earlier. And I don't know if that happens without that referendum sort of galvanizing the Democratic Party. One referendum that you didn't mention that I think will help the Democrats a lot more is the Florida abortion referendum, because we still don't know how Donald Trump, the Florida resident, will vote on it.
If somebody asks,
never tell. But JD Vance is already trying to say that Trump will actually veto a national abortion ban, and that's got a bunch of the pro-life base furious at him. He will have to try to walk that back over the next 2 or 3 weeks, and that'll get the rest of the country furious at him. And it will be this sort of ping pong that goes back and forth between who does Donald Trump tick off on this or that various day. And as he tries to sort out what leave it to the states means, he's going to get reminded over and over again that Stephen Douglas actually finished last in the 1860 election.
His rant about all legal scholars wanted it returned to the states. Democrats, Republicans wanted it returned to the states. That is nonsense. It is absolute freaking nonsense. You've got like Laura Ingraham going, I don't think that women understand that, it's for the states to decide. I'm like, no, women understand perfectly, Laura. We don't want the states to decide. We want women to decide for themselves without input from the states. And them trying to say abortion isn't banned. It is banned. If you live in Texas, it's banned. If you live in South Dakota or North Dakota, it's banned. Geography should not be destiny in this country unless you're talking about weather. And I'm so annoyed with the flagrancy of the lies and the bad faith arguing that they're all doing. And if punching people in the throat was legal, maybe I'd be less stressed. All right, let's take a little walk down memory lane. We've all lived through, definitely more than one presidential campaign. Maybe we don't need to cite numbers here. Don't need to admit too much. But we've all observed these from different perspectives. Which ones do you remember the best? Which ones make you smile when you think about them? Kevin, I'll let you go first, because I think you've got some good answers here.
Well, I certainly probably remember the most of them just because I'm somewhat older than you guys. The Jimmy Carter 1976 one was a highlight for me.
Oh, I voted in that election for Jimmy Carter.
There you go.
Yeah, my mother let me pull the lever. I was 3.
Oh, wow. The Jimmy Carter 1980 election, where he lost to Ronald Reagan, was a big disappointment to me. I was also disappointed in Michael Dukakis losing. I thought he had a chance, but I was still disappointed. Obviously, Obama, everybody cried that night. Yeah, I have so many individual memories of elections, there's no one. I mean, Obama would be hard to top, although we're going to top it this year if Harris gets elected. And of course, the disappointment of 2016. So I too many disappointments and a couple of real standouts.
DJ, how about you? Stipulating again, DJ was a Republican for a long time, so his nostalgia is going to be a different flavor than ours, but it is no less valid.
It is. And probably for me, actually would be the first one I really paid the most attention to, which was 1988. Not only because the candidate I preferred won, but because I think it still is the largest comeback from a poll deficit in history. I mean, George Bush the Elder really was trailing by 17 points in the polls, and he managed to pull all the way back from that and then some. People don't look back at 1988 as a memorable campaign because you had the Reagan campaigns prior. It was bookended by two very persuasive politicians getting elected. But the 1988 campaign had some drama and had some excitement that a lot of campaigns since then haven't had. I mean, 1996 was basically the nothing happened campaign. Bill Clinton was ahead in January, and he basically stayed ahead by a bunch all the way through, and almost nothing happened. I
actually had to think who Bill Clinton was running against in 96.
And there we go. That's perfect.
And it was Bob Dole, not a minor figure.
No one forgets Bob Dole.
Yeah, well, there we go. It was quite a story, and it was really, for the first one, it was the first one I really paid attention to. It was quite dramatic and exciting. I think the one that had the most impact on me would have actually been 2012, where Romney lost, because for one, it was the first American version of the polls really messing up, particularly at the national level. I mean, Gallup still doesn't do presidential horse race elections because it got 2012 so badly wrong. And it was really my first recognition that the little universe of which I was a part, I knew it wasn't all of America, but I presumed it was a majority of America. And I had to sit up and accept the fact that it wasn't that it wasn't really an American majority anymore. That was the one that really forced me to do a lot more soul searching than any of the others either before since.
Rebecca?
It was Obama. And I'll tell you why. I had a baby in January of 2008. And everything about that election was suddenly about someone other than me. And you don't forget your first election as a mother and what it means. So that's my story.
Great answer.
And now I've got to think about the cost of college because of that self-same baby.
Yep.
We're all smart enough. We don't need to go to school anymore. Just listen to us. We are as brilliant as they come, the smartest podcasters on the great big series of tubes that we call the internet. So thank you for listening. If you enjoy what we do here, please follow our Instagram at MPU Fan Club or our Substack page, where I swear to God, we will all write something very, very soon. And don't forget to share our link on your social media timelines so everyone you've ever met can find us. And DJ will start doing TikTok dances if we get really popular. DJ didn't know that he was going to do that. I just made it up, but we'll get on that, I promise. And thanks, as always, to Alan Keeney for our theme music. And as we head into the beginning of September, what are you most looking forward to for fall? DJ, any good cons coming up or long songwriting marathons?
No, I'm looking forward to the resumption of the NFL season. I'm looking forward to football.
I was going to say, so you're looking forward to seeing your team lose. That's fun for you. Statement of fact.
I know it's not going to be a particularly good year for the Giants. But that's okay. It'll be just good to see football again, and it will be good to see the Yankees in the playoffs. I'm pretty sure that will happen.
All right, Kevin, how about you? Any top plans for fall?
Well, not to be morose, but I've had to stay very close to home all summer long because of some health and medical treatments that I've been getting locally. So I'm looking forward to that coming to an end on September 10th. So Jessica and I can start traveling again. And we don't know exactly where we're going, but we will be doing some traveling in the fall and winter.
I think you should go to places like Bora Bora and Fiji. And
I was just reading about those today.
yeah, I mean, go rent yourself a cabana and a hammock, and like you can drink things out of coconut shells. It'll be great.
What a great place to watch the election
the
results.
debate. Yeah, in fact, just stay there if they go badly.
Yes.